Chapter 12. The Bedtime Story. No sleeping bag or blanket of itself produces any warmth. In the absence of a fire, the human body is ordinarily the only heat-generating machine in the wilderness camp. The normal man, sleeping or lounging relaxed beside a campfire, liberates somewhat less than 100 calories of heat every hour. This output can be increased in two ways. Rigorous exertion can, over the day, multiply the yield as much as 6 times. Even shivering, a form of muscular exercise and one of nature's safeguards against freezing, will build up the release of body warmth several times. Eating, too, stimulates the caloric output. The increase is quicker, although of shorter duration, with carbohydrates, greater and more lasting with proteins. The skin automatically begins to shut off surface blood circulation when exposed to cold. It can thus decrease the heat loss from the skin as much as a fourth of normal. Alcohol, it so happens, prevents this natural thermostat from functioning properly, bringing on rapid and sometimes dangerous heat loss at the same time that the individual may be deluded into believing himself warmed and stimulated. Wind, as well as low temperature, produces chilling and accelerated dissipation of bodily warmth. All that a sleeping bag or any other bedding can do, therefore, is to delay the loss of body warmth by insulating the individual both against the undue waste of that heat and against encroachments of cold and wind. The most effective insulation known for this purpose is dry, still air. Thus, the effectiveness of bed materials in keeping one warm is in direct proportion not to their weight, but to the number of dead air cells they contain. The thicker a sleeping robe or blanket is, and the fluffier its nature, the more inert air it affords. Blankets. 50 years ago, sleeping bags consisted of several thicknesses of wool blankets sewed into a bag from inside an outer sack of canvas. They were little else, in fact, than a more or less convenient and controversial way of preventing the kicking off of blankets during sleep. Horace Kephart, calling them unpleasant traps, did not disagree that on the whole sleeping bags were an accursed invention of a misguided soul. For nearly 3 centuries, the most famous blankets on this continent have been the Hudson Bay Company point blankets, spun and woven of virgin wool and still distributed throughout the furthest regions of North America by the Governor and Company of Adventurers of England trading into Hudson's Bay. One sees these everywhere in the northern wilderness, in use under the severest conditions for every conceivable outdoor purpose, from trapping gold at the bottom of a sluice box to providing temporary sails for a canoe. During the years most closely following the HBC's incorporation on 2nd of May, 1670, the short stripes or points on these blankets signified the number of large prime beaver skins it took to barter for them. The present 3.5 and 4 points now indicate difference in blanket area. The material is of standard quality and weight. Army blankets are closely woven for durability and are not nearly as warm as Hudson Bay blankets. However, in my youth, I got along fairly well with Army blankets, 5 pounds each, pinned into a bag form with 6 horse blanket safety pins. This arrangement, incidentally, was also used by the other half of this writing team when on the verge of his teens he was making his first weekend and summer camps in New England. Like him, I customarily spread this improvised sleeping sack on top of a poncho and a browse mattress. Protection from wind and rain was necessary, for the insulating value of a blanket is in ratio to its functional bulk when sheltered from these. 1 blanket sufficed for summer, 4 were a lot more comfortable during fall hunting trips. Then it froze most nights, and you sometimes could hardly sleep because of the scraping of snow overhead. This insomnia was not the result of any discomfort, for ordinarily such a storm is soothing, while snow piling up lightly against a shelter has an insulating effect. Rather, it is because of the exciting realization that the most stirring of all hunting conditions might be awaiting us the next morning, a fresh white tracking snow. The combination was heavy and bulky, and it took more than half an hour to make bed, including the browse mattress, but we had plenty of time in those days. Sleeping bag materials. The better modern sleeping bags utilize more effective insulating materials, which are at once thicker and lighter than blankets, affording therefore much more dead air space pound for pound. The best insulating filler providing maximum warmth with minimum weight is genuine waterfowl down. This pure down is expensive, and some makers mix in a few feathers, reducing both the cost as well as the insulating properties. But you still have a pretty good bag. Feathers themselves are bulkier and not so resilient, therefore still less warm, although such fillers are sometimes improved by the removal of the quills. Next, in thermal value, probably came some of the new synthetic materials such as Dacron, which are light and durable as well as impervious to mold, moths, and mildew. Dacron, one of the synthetic fibers developed by DuPont, has a heat-retaining value about midway between goose down and wool. If weight and bulk are not primary considerations, Dacron, although at this writing not thoroughly tried in the field, seems desirable as a filler for ordinary summer and fall use because of its low cost as compared to down. It is not as superb as pure waterfowl down for backpacking or for extreme cold. Wool batting and kapok bags attract many buyers. The latter is a vegetable fiber that is reasonably effective for a while, but which eventually mats and finally powders with use. Speaking very generally, the inexpensive bags filled with these materials, when conscientiously made and honestly advertised by reputable outfitters, are satisfactory enough for warm weather camping when night temperatures do not go below 40 degrees Fahrenheit and when easy transportation is assured. Not very much money should be spent for a bag with a questionable or mediocre filler. It would be more prudent to add a few more dollars and purchase one of the less expensive down or feather bags, getting along with blankets in the meantime, if necessary. 2, you can emulate some trappers and prospectors we know and make your own bag. Materials including shells, liners, covers, fasteners, and pure new down in bulk can be purchased from some of the outfitters for this purpose. Sleeping bag fabrics. The down feathers, batting, or other filler for sleeping bag use must be enclosed in a light and very tightly woven fabric from which it cannot escape. This container should be sewed into tubes or other restricted compartments so that any shifting of the stuffing will be held to a minimum, maintaining as nearly as possible a uniform thickness throughout. Outside of this insulating layer is a strong, light, and high count cover which should be water resistant and fairly impervious to wind, but not waterproof. If the cover were waterproof, it would, unless kept partly open, confine the vapor that the body constantly throws off. This would soon make the bag clammy and cold. In frigid weather, such a condition could mean freezing to death. In many bags, there is no inside lining, the sleeper being in contact with the shell that contains the filler. Some of the better bags intended for use in cold climates have a thin woolen liner that, adding but little to bulk and weight, is particularly appreciated on sub-zero nights when one first crawls into the sack. There is no special objection to pinning light cotton, linen, or woolen sheets inside a bag if care is taken not to puncture tubes holding such an escape-prone filler as down. Awnings and pockets. A number of sleeping bags are provided with an awning that, attached to the cover, may be erected as a shelter over the head. Advertising agencies delight in picturing sleeping bags with this awning raised and the camper sleeping blissfully in the rain. It is a provocative selling point, certainly. The difficulty in real life is that any such sleeping bag would have to be waterproof. This, as we already considered, would be an impractical arrangement. In warm weather, no matter how dry, it would be like sleeping in a steam bath. In cold temperatures, the imprisoned body moisture would soon negate all insulating qualities and freeze us. You need to sleep under a tarp, tent, or some other shelter in stormy weather. Such an awning can have its uses, however, although you may care to trim it down some so as to conserve space and weight. The flap can be used, for instance, to roll the bag in for carrying and may thus eliminate the need for a special container. You may also find it convenient as a mat on which to store a few odds and ends, where they will be instantly available if you should want any during the night. Otherwise, cut the appendage off and lay it on the ground alongside your robes so that when you get up to dress, you'll have a flat, clean area on which you can stand until you get into your socks and boots. The pockets provided by some manufacturers for air mattresses are neither necessary nor advisable. They add both weight and expense. They are just something else to wear out. Employing them means that you will not be able to use the bag equally on both sides, alternating the top and bottom as is possible with sleeping robes. Opening down one side will add both to the article's longevity and to your comfort. There is absolutely no need for a mattress pocket. The reason some individuals are troubled for a while by a bed slipping off its pneumatic softener is almost invariably a result of the latter's being blown up too hard. Air mattresses. Maximum comfort is attained when one has an air mattress under a good and adequate sleeping robe. One of these requires only several minutes to inflate. A browse mattress takes about half an hour for proper making, and it mats down enough to be uncomfortably hard after the second, if not the first night. The natural tendency among individuals accustomed to sleeping on the rather solid conventional bed is to pump up their air mattress to full. It will be just about right if you will inflate it until you can just barely touch the ground when pressing down on the center with your fist. Another way to accomplish the same result is to pump in more air than you'll need and then lie on it on your side and open the valve until your hip bone just touches the hard surface beneath. One of the small, light rubber pumps is convenient for inflating. The bulb attachment can be worked by either hand or foot. If weight and space are important considerations, a good air mattress to secure is one about 4 feet long by half as wide. This should be located just beneath the shoulders and hips. Browse, leaves, brush, or anything else suitable, such as horse blanket, may then be used to level off under the head and legs. The stability afforded by this last evening off of the sleeping surface generally eliminates any tendency there may be to roll off the mattress during the night. Poles or even a couple of large rocks can always be placed at either side of the bed to keep everything in position. Once the average individual has slept out on such an arrangement for several nights, however, he won't have any trouble in making his bed stay put. Most never do experience any difficulty. If a little additional bulk and weight will pose no problem, and if the amount of use you plan to put the bed softener to throughout the years will justify the added expense, by all means secure the best available full-length air mattress. These are particularly excellent for cabin use. All air mattresses are by themselves admittedly cold in frosty weather. The shortcoming can be entirely overcome by spreading some insulation such as a fur robe or spare woolens between the mattress and the robe. This disadvantage is more than offset by the unexcelled coolness afforded by having nothing more substantial than a mass of air beneath you during the hot months. An air mattress should be laid on a hard, flat, rigid surface. There is no need to bother removing minor irregularities. The mattress will automatically adjust to them, although some of the more fragile models need something such as a tarp between them and rough ground for protection against puncturing. One occasionally sees these mattresses being used on sagging bunks and cots to the discomfort of the occupant. Sleeping on the floor under such conditions is far more relaxing. Such a bed can be adapted for air mattress use, however, by providing it with a solid surface of boards or poles. What about warmth? Sleeping robes containing 3 to 4 pounds of mixed down and feathers are usually satisfactory when temperatures are above zero. For fall hunting in the north and at high altitudes, 4 to 5 pounds of down will provide comfortable repose in cold as low as 10 to 20 degrees below zero. We've both put in good nights in our elder downs when the colored alcohol in the thermometer has contracted more than 100 degrees below freezing. When it's that icy, you appreciate 5 to 6 pounds of down in addition to a saggy woolen lining that doesn't let you shiver too long when you pile in and draw the top up over your head. Inside the bag is a place for your head to be when the sap in the trees starts freezing and the banging and snapping of tearing, bursting fibers joins the heavier cannonade of expanding ice. Your nose, however, must be outside, both for fresh air and to avoid filling the bag with moist vapor. On the frostiest nights, with too light a bag, you may have to turn in with your clothes on. These should be absolutely dry. Loosen all tight areas beforehand and empty your pockets, placing the contents where none will be lost. If you have a flashlight, which you may have cause to use during the darkness, take it in the bag with you. Extreme cold may otherwise immobilize the batteries. It will be better, when possible, to figure on carrying a heavier bag and sleeping raw in it. Flannel pajamas are ordinarily appreciated, but in very cold weather you'll actually be more comfortable without even them because of the way they will retain a certain amount of body moisture. Except for something to protect the feet, you won't need to don anything if you have to haul out for any reason. The body will retain its own aura of warmth for a couple of minutes or so. When the cold does strike, pajamas aren't going to keep it out. Such exposure will not be harmful in any respect or even unpleasant. You will probably be shivering when you crawl back into the sack, but warmth will soon take over, and almost at once you'll be drowsing again. Adjusting warmth. It is best when possible to choose a sleeping robe suitable for the lowest temperatures you expect to encounter. A good down robe that will keep you warm on nights when twinkling ice crystals form a scintillating ceiling close above the throbbing earth to which campfire smoke ascends in unwavering pillars will still be pleasant during the warmth of summer. By the time you will be using it nearly open, and you will be probably be sleeping with at least your head, arms, and chest uncovered. A robe with snaps, preferably anyway, to the vulnerable zipper for wilderness use can be adjusted most satisfactorily to changing temperatures. The warmth of a down bag, and to a lesser extent that of all bags, can be regulated to a very large degree by the frequency with which it is aired. In very cold weather, daily airings will keep the down fluffed out and heat conducting moisture expelled. In hot weather, you'll find it more comfortable if aired only as it lies on the bed. Care should be taken when the robe is hung across a line to suspend it parallel to the tubes that contain the insulation. Redistributing the down. One difficulty experienced with sleeping robes in which down and similar filler are used is that this insulation has a tendency to shift toward the bottom. This leaves the upper area of the robe vulnerable to low temperatures. In many instances, it results in the expense and nuisance of returning the article to the factory for renovation. You can redistribute the filler yourself on the spot as a matter of fact. The process is very simple. Open a robe, lay it on a hard surface such as the ground or floor with the inside upward. Procure a supple stick about a yard long, then start beating the robe lightly from the foot up towards the center. You will be able to feel when a reasonably uniform thickness has been returned. If necessary, turn the robe over and go through the same process on the other side. Mummy bags. Several outfitters supply small body-fitting mummy bags which contain from 2 to 3 pounds of down and which roll into very small bundles weighing about twice the weight of the filler. Such bags are intended chiefly for hikers and climbers who have to pack all their equipment on their backs. They offer wonderful possibilities in putting together a go-light outfit. One of us has ridden many wilderness miles with a little bag of this sort, still as good as new after 10 years of rough usage. Rolled in a small tarpaulin along with some grub and other essentials and tied behind his saddle. Our experienced mountain climbers have found these are satisfactory down to about 10 degrees above freezing, provided they are used in a small alpine tent with some sort of soft insulation under them. If it gets too cold for a night or so, you can turn in fully clad, except for boots, in dry and preferably fresh clothing. These mountain bags, which can be brought to fit your height, are made about 18 inches at the bottom and up to some 36 inches wide at the top. The user is thus encased like a mummy. When he turns over during the sleep, the entire bag is apt to turn over with him. This is not objectionable after one becomes accustomed to it. As a matter of fact, after a few nights, you can get in the habit of holding the top down with your two hands and maneuvering sufficiently with the hips and feet to keep the bag in place when you move. This soon comes to be second nature. My collaborator's wife, for example, prefers this model of eiderdown. Some, however, never do feel fully relaxed in the mummy bag, particularly if they have slept many months in the large 90 by 90 inch Titans of the tall timber. Some individuals, when they want a lighter bag, may prefer the more conventional rectangular sack, which run on up from 30 inches wide when closed, and in some excellent all-waterproof down models weigh less than 4 pounds. A large man 6 feet or over will find a bag 40 inches wide or more a lot more comfortable. You may also have to hunch up in the hands to turn in those too, but a few nights of this makes the process as natural as stepping over a log. Pillow. You may find that some sort of pillow will add greatly to your comfort. This may be a folded shirt, it may be a pillowcase that you stuff with dry pine needles or wind marsh hay. It may be an air pillow that you can blow up by mouth in a few seconds. One of these weighs but an ounce or so and can be carried in a game pocket during wet weather to double as a dry seat. 2 ways to make a fur blanket. The more remote Indians of the north often made blankets of rabbit skin and similar furs. They still do, for that matter, although the squaws' activities along these lines have decreased considerably, since tribes have found it easier to get money by other means, and with this to buy commercial blankets and sleeping bags. The job is not a difficult one, however. Anyone on hand during a rabbit year can fashion such a robe. There are two general methods. One way is to stretch and dry the skins of varying hares, snowshoe rabbits, marmots, or similar small creatures whose light and fragile pelts are not particularly valuable. Each skin is then cut in a long ribbon about 3/4 of an inch wide. This is done by starting outside and cutting around the circumference. A ribbon several yards long is thus obtained from the larger pelts. The ribbon is then spiraled around a rawhide cord often known locally as babbage, whose simple manufacture is described elsewhere in this book. The resulting fur ropes are sewed together at the ends, making a single long line. A pole framed the size of the desired blanket is lashed or otherwise fastened together. The fur rope is woven into it to form the blanket, which is finally bound on the edges with cloth or buckskin. The weave customarily is very loose. You can poke a finger through it anywhere. A blanket about 5 by 7 feet therefore weighs in this stage a little more than a pound. These fur robes have never been very durable, and their hair keeps coming out. To offset both these faults to some extent, they're often quilted between two thicknesses of some fabric, such as light wool blanket. The second method consists of shingling a blanket or other fabric, occasionally the fine burlap in which the Hudson Bay Company sews and seals its fur, with tanned whole hides lapped an inch or so. The sew-basted pelts are then sandwiched protectively by sewing over them another piece of jute, canvas blanket, or any other hardy fabric. Browse bed. The real browse bed is not made by lopping off a half a dozen spruce boughs and dropping them beneath the tree where the sleeping bag is to be spread. A real functional browse bed is thatched. Movies often accomplish this task in a minute or two, despite divisions that may include turning just in time to club an uncreeping wolf or two. In real life, even without interruptions, the process requires more like half an hour. As old woodsmen sometimes remark, they go into the woods to have a good time, and a third of that time is spent in bed. You won't have an enjoyable or even a refreshing vacation unless you get a reasonably relaxing sleep most nights, and it is in the bed of the beginner that most discomfort starts. When an experienced woodsman makes camp, he gives attention to his bed first of all. He wants it soft, dry, smooth, and warm. He therefore selects a level, clean, dry piece of ground about 3 feet by 7 feet, first pulling up any shrubs, dislodging a stone or two with a heel, and perhaps kicking out a root with the back of his axe. He cuts 4 poles and stakes them in place to form a rectangle in which to confine his bedding. He can, as we've often done, fill this with pine needles and let it go at that. However, the best mattress can be extemporized from forest materials. If this is to be a special sort of camp and he can spare the time, is one built of evergreen boughs. The springiest evergreen branches obtainable are needed for this. Best, for example, are the small boughs of the heavily needled balsam. All such branches can be most easily carried to the bed, if they are dropped one by one over the handle of an axe. The needles will then interlock, holding the entire mass in place. If you are using a knife, a stick with an up-pointing stub at the end will serve. You start a browse bed by placing a deep layer of boughs at the head. The branches are placed upside down, opposite of how they grow. The butts point toward the foot of the bed and are well covered by succeeding layers. Row after row is laid in this manner. The final mattress should be at least 1 foot thick. It should be leveled off and given additional resiliency by shoving in young evergreen tips wherever space can be found. The first night on such a bed is something that everyone should experience at least once. The second night will be a bit lumpy. After the third night, you will probably bring in an axe load of fresh boughs and, fluffing up and rearranging the aromatic greenness, essay to renovate it by interposing new materials as sagaciously as possible.